In today's video, we are going to be looking at cold-tolerant plants that are hardy down to zone 3, but that also can be grown up to zone 9. Hi, I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings, and I often get asked, from those of you that are in the cooler climates, what are some perennials that can grow for me? And yet, those of you in the warmer climates too, sometimes you feel like you're left out with plants that kind of end at zone 8. So what I'm doing today is I did a search of plants that are hardy down to zone 3 for those of you in the north, but hardy to zone 9 for those of you in the south. So these are plants that are very versatile in many areas of the United States. So let's dive in and take a look at what some of these plants are. But before we do dive in, let me introduce myself. I am Heidi from Garden Crossings. Garden Crossings is a mail order company, and we ship plants all over the United States. We also have a retail garden center in Zeeland, Michigan. So if you ever happen to be in the area during the spring or summer or fall, we'd love to have you come visit us. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first perennial variety. So the first variety we're going to look at is Sedum. Sedum is one of those very versatile plants that can be used just about anywhere in the United States. What we're going to look at is we have 3 different groups of sedums we're going to talk about today. These are part of the Proven Winner collection. There is the Rock and Grow, Rock and Low, and Rock and Round series. So let's go ahead and break these down and talk about each of the series and what kind of differentiates one from the other. First of all, we've got the Rock and Grow sedum. It's more of an upright type sedum that gets 26 to 32 inches tall, creates a nice upright mounding habit. The varieties that you'll find in that series would be Back in Black, which is beautiful black or really deep dark foliage with pink flowers. Also, you'll find Coral Jade, which is a rich green foliage. It's got nice citron buds, and then as those buds open, they will show a nice beautiful coral flower. Lemon Jade, this one has been a popular one over the years, and it's kind of a unique coloration. It's a sedum that's got kind of a grayish green foliage with citron yellow buds that open up to kind of a greenish flower. So very monotone in color, but I think a lot of people are just looking for something different, and that Lemon Jade sedum definitely is something very different. Also, there is Tiramisu, which has beautiful bronze leaves, blush pink buds that open up to nice cream flowers. So a really great variation of not only foliage, but flower color with that Rock and Grow series of sedum. Next, we have the Rock and Low series, and the name kind of would imply that this is going to be a low growing sedum series, and it certainly is. So this series, it gets about 6 to 8 inches tall and can spread up to 24 inches wide. Some of the varieties that you would find in that Rock and Low series would be Boogie Woogie, which has beautiful green foliage with cream edges, and then yellow flowers that bloom early summer. Also in that series would be the Yellow Brick Road sedum, which has dark green leaves with red stems, which is really pretty unique, and that also blooms with yellow flowers mid to late summer. The next of the sedum series would be the Rock and Round series, and they get 10 to 12 inches tall and about 16 to 20 inches wide, forming a nice mounding habit. Some of the varieties that are in the Rock and Round series would be Bright Idea, which has great green foliage, red stems, which is unique, and it blooms mid-summer. Also, there is Bundle of Joy, which has bright green foliage with crisp white flowers midsummer. Pride and Joy is another in this series with dark green leaves and magenta blooms. And then there's Pure Joy, which has more of a bluish green leaves or foliage to it and nice bubblegum pink flowers. And then there's 2 that are even lower growing than the ones I talked about previously here, and that would be the Superstar sedum, which has a deep kind of a bluish green foliage. It has a nice kind of a smoky gray overlay, so really a unique coloration and very vibrant rosy pink flowers. Also, with a very similar habit to Superstar would be Popstar, which has also kind of a blue-green foliage with gray to purple stems, creamy gray buds that open up to salmon pink flowers. So many of these we've used in our trial gardens or in our gardens here at the house, and we've really been pleased with the different series of sedum that we grow here at Garden Crossings, but that we've also trialed and grown in our own gardens. So why would you want to plant sedum in your garden? It's a great plant for attracting butterflies and pollinators. It's rabbit resistant. It likes to be grown in moderate to dry locations. Planted in full sun, and it's perfect for like rock gardens or perennial beds or even around foundation plantings. Sedum really is a very easy perennial to grow, and pretty much there's not a lot of fussing with it. You just plant it and it does what it does, and it's a beautiful plant. Next, we're going to be talking about Hosta, which is also another perennial that is hardy from zones 3 to 9. And I think a lot of people are familiar with hostas. And there are thousands of varieties of hostas across the US. So certainly hosta is not a plant that is hard to find or locate. Just about any garden center is going to have some form of hosta, I'm sure. Now, if you're looking for specialty hostas, that's where you maybe would come to Garden Crossings to find some of those that are a little bit more unique and different than what you may find locally. So with hostas, they like to be grown in full sun to full shade locations. Now, there are certain hostas that do better in sun and certain hostas that do better in shade. So you will want to kind of pay attention to the information based on the hosta that you are looking at. Kind of a general rule of thumb that we have found is the lighter the foliage, the more shade you would want to plant it in. So typically ones that will be white or have white on them, or more of a lighter chartreuse yellow or green, they're going to be the ones that are going to probably be better suited in more of a shady or part shade location, where a lot of them that are green or blue foliage, they can handle more sun. A lot of people I know often are like, oh, hostas have to go in shade, but something that maybe many people don't know is in production, these hostas are grown out in the middle of a field in full sun, and they don't get any protection at all. Now, some situations, some of them may have a little bit of leaf burn because they aren't getting the shade, but the plants do grow and do thrive out in these full sun fields. So with hostas, there's all different kind of sizes. So there are huge hostas that get 4 to 5 foot tall and wide. There's little miniatures that only get a couple inches tall and a couple inches wide. So really, no matter what size garden you're gardening in, there is a hosta that is going to fit your garden need. They come in various colors. There's green shades, there's blue greens, there's chartreuse, there's yellow, there's white, and then there's just all of the hostas that have all those variations of colors in them. So you might find a blue one with some yellow margins or striping in it. You might find a green one with white edges. So there's a lot of variation with hostas. So some of them have just a solid leaf, like I was saying, solid leaf, and a lot of them are bi or tricolor, where they'll have various shades of greens, blues, whites, yellows in them. One thing I like to do with hostas, because I never really was a very big fan of hostas, to be honest with you, was until we started mixing and matching them together. So we take a whole, we have a garden that's just loaded with hostas, and I'll try to find a picture to show you. But basically what we did is we took probably 50, 60 hostas and mixed them all together, putting the taller ones towards the back and working our way forward as their heights got shorter with the smaller ones in the front. And what we did by having all of these various colors, it created a beautiful patchwork in that shady part shade area in our garden. And you weren't just looking at one specific hosta, each of them was playing off of each other. So you see all these different variations popping in the garden, and it's a beautiful way to garden with hostas. So if you're somebody that's like, I don't know about hostas, they're just not my thing, try getting maybe 5 or 6 different ones and just planting them together to create a beautiful patchwork of color. So in the summer, hostas usually send up a flower that is either white or lavender. Usually there's a little bit of fragrance that goes on with that flower. It also is nice for attracting hummingbirds and pollinators to the garden. So if you're trying to, bring those pollinators to the garden, hostas definitely have a nice bell-shaped flower in which those pollinators will enjoy. So when using hostas, you can plant them and make a border. You can plant them in mass. You can just do one as a specimen. There's really no right or wrong way to use hostas when you're planting them out in your gardens or your landscapes. But not only are they for gardens and landscapes, they also are an excellent plant if you're looking to just plant up some containers. Put a few hostas in there, mix and match with some other perennials, and it's a nice plant that will overwinter well, again, most areas of the country because it is so hardy, even in a container. The next plant we're going to look at is Lychnis Orange Gnome, which I think is maybe not a perennial that many people are familiar with, although those that know it, they know it and they love it. So Lychnis Orange Gnome gets about 12 to 15 inches tall and wide. It's got kind of a nice upright mounding type habit. It does like to be grown in full sun areas, and it's got beautiful vibrant orange blooms that are about 1.5 inches wide, so a pretty nice size flower. And the nice thing with it is it blooms virtually all summer long. We're going to say it blooms up to 8 weeks or so, but you can continue to trim it and deadhead it, and it will continue to give you flowers all season long. In addition to the beautiful orange flowers, it's got really nice burgundy foliage. So if you're looking to kind of, change up your foliage color in your garden a little bit, that burgundy looks really nice, especially with those orange flowers. It likes to be planted in moderate to moist locations. It makes a great cut flower if you're somebody that likes to do cut flower gardening. It's another one of those perennials that is a wonderful hummingbird attractor. And to be honest, from what we've found in a lot of different information and hearing from customers, it's one of the most sought after orange flowering perennials that we carry. Another plant that is versatile across the country is Pulmonaria, which is typically known for being more of a shade type plant. There's several different varieties of Pulmonaria. Most of the time they're going to have a variegated foliage. Usually they've got green leaves with kind of white or creamy speckles or splotches on it. So even when that plant is not blooming, there's a lot of foliage interest. The flower colors range from pink to purple to periwinkle to blue, kind of all in those different shades. Depending on what variety you're looking at, you typically will have a flower that will go pink to periwinkle, or you'll usually get kind of 2 variations of flower color from when it opens to as the flower ages. But there are some varieties where you're going to have just like a solid pink or a solid blue or purple bloom. They like to be planted in full to part shade. They are a spring blooming perennial, but even when they're done blooming, like I said, they've got great foliage that adds a lot of interest to those shades or part shade gardens. It's got fuzzy, kind of pokey-ish, but not terribly pokey-ish foliage, which is what makes this plant a great plant for being deer and rabbit resistant. Typically, they're not going to touch this plant due to the texture of its foliage. Pulmonaria get about 14 to 18 inches tall and about 24 inches wide, usually forming a nice mounding type habit. It does attract hummingbirds and bees. So if you're looking to add something that will bring pollinators to the garden, this would be one of those shade perennials that will help with the pollinators. And oftentimes it's used in mass as a border. You can also use this in a container garden. Some of the varieties that we currently carry would be Raspberry Splash, which has been around for quite a long time. We also have Pink A Blue and Spot On, which they're a little bit uniquely different one to the other, and all are very beautiful perennials. Next on the list are daylilies. So daylilies really are the workhorse in the garden. Again, and like hostas, I feel like everybody pretty much knows or has heard of daylilies before. They're long blooming. A lot of them are repeat blooming. So they're just, like I said, the workhorse in the garden, a plant that's easy to take care of and really does a nice job when it's flowering. There are different flower forms of daylilies. There are single flowers as well as doubles. So different forms you can look for when you're looking for daylilies. And the flower size also can vary. I mean, there's some daylilies that are just little small flowers, maybe 3 inches or so across, to some really large flowers that are 8 inches across. So it really there's a lot you can look for when you're looking for color and interest in daylilies. Again, another one that there's just thousands of varieties of daylilies across the US. So pretty readily available in most garden centers. But if you're looking for something unique and different, that's where you would look to Garden Crossings, because we carry new and unique daylilies that are on the market. Daylilies come in various colors as well: reds, oranges, yellows, burgundies, and whites. And a lot of them are even bicolor or tricolored, where they've got a mix of 2 to 3 of the different colors on one plant. Sometimes the petals are smooth edged, other times they're more of like a ripply pie crust edge. So the pie crust edge kind of gives a nice texture to that flower, adds a little bit of dimension. Some of them are fragrant, so that's something to look for too when you're looking for daylilies, is not only looking at the color of the flower, but also to see if it might be a fragrant variety, which can be kind of nice when you've got that nice fragrance in the garden. Daylilies are super easy to grow. They're salt tolerant, they're drought tolerant. Really, it's pretty hard to not be able to grow a daylily. They're just that versatile in so many different locations. So there's a couple different kinds of daylilies. There's the diploids and the tetraploids. So what does that mean? The diploids are the original daylilies that were on the market. And then breeders and such started playing with the chromosomes of the plants and came up with the tetraploids. So is one better than the other? No, not necessarily. They're just different. So the diploids, you're going to get a lot more variation of different flower forms and also colors, where the tetraploids, they've been bred, they have thicker leaves, thicker flowers, stronger flower scapes, more intense coloration, and increased vigor. So you may be giving up a little bit of the uniqueness of daylilies with the diploids to the hardiness and just the amount of flowers you're going to get with the tetraploids. And a lot of the new daylilies on the market are tetraploids and are just absolutely vibrant coloration and, like we said, profuse bloomers with a lot of vigor. Daylilies like to be planted in full sun to part shade locations. And as the name implies, which some of you may not know this if you're not super familiar with daylilies, but daylily, the flowers last for just one day. Now that's why you want to make sure when you're looking for daylilies that you're creating ones that have excellent vigor, because you want to make sure that they're ones that are going to be putting out a lot of flowers, because like I said, the flower lasts one day. You want a plant that's going to give you lots of flowers. Next on the list is hollyhocks, and I feel like hollyhocks are just kind of one of those old-fashioned favorites when it comes to perennials. They add kind of that cottage charm to the garden. I think there's a lot of sometimes nostalgia or memories that are wrapped around hollyhocks. You think maybe of, if your grandma had a garden or something, or farmers with hollyhocks. There's just memories, I think, associated with hollyhocks. So they get about 5 to 6 foot tall and about 2 foot wide. So very tall growing perennials. They're single blooms and double blooms, and there's a lot of different colors that the hollyhocks come in. So certainly if there's a color you like, probably hollyhock, there'll be some flower color that will work for you in your garden. So they like to be grown in average to fertile soil. They do attract hummingbirds and butterflies to the garden, and they're easy to grow. They're quick growing. So something that if this is your first time and you want to start doing some gardening, hollyhocks might be something to consider for a new garden. One thing we will recommend though with hollyhocks is, because they do get so tall, 5 to 6 foot tall in a lot of situations, is you'll want to plant them up against a fence or a wall or something where they can have something to lean against, because with that height they do tend to fall over in the wind. So you may want to place them someplace that you can either stake them or tie them up so that the flowers in the stems will stay upright. Next on the list, and I think this is just another one of those kind of old-time favorites, is Dicentra. So there's a couple different types of Dicentra or bleeding heart. So there's the old-fashioned Dicentra spectabilis, and there's also fern leaf Dicentra. I think Dicentra is really kind of an old-fashioned favorite. The Dicentra spectabilis gets about 2 to 3 foot tall, likes to be grown in shade to part shade locations. They've got these beautiful arching flower stems with the little bleeding hearts or little bells. They look like hearts, but kind of dangling off that stem. It's just so pretty to watch them as they open in the spring. Also, there's the fern leaf, and they get about 12 to 18 inches tall and wide, so a little bit shorter, more dense foliage on those. Those are a long blooming bleeding heart, so they can bloom all summer long, where the Dicentra spectabilis, they don't bloom quite as long. They're more of a spring bloomer. Once they're done, they're kind of done. A lot of times they'll go dormant in the summer due to the heat, so don't be concerned if they do seem like they're dying back and you're losing your foliage. They're just going dormant for the summer. Another bleeding heart that we carry, this one is, we're going to call it by its name, which is pink diamonds. And the first time I saw this bleeding heart, it's got beautiful fern leaf foliage. It was planted in a full sun garden, and I thought, oh my goodness, they got this in the wrong space. This is supposed to be in a shade or part shade area. It's in the full sun. This plant is never going to do well. Well, that was where I was wrong. It was a whole new type of family of bleeding heart that I was not familiar with, and it prefers to be grown in full sun to part sun areas. And pink diamonds, I'm telling you, that is a workhorse of a plant that blooms all summer long. So from early spring, once your garden starts to wake up, until like the frost in the fall, that plant is putting on flowers without stopping, no deadheading needed, all summer long. So with Dicentra or bleeding heart, they come in shades of pink, white, and red. There is going to be a little bit of different flower form based on if you're getting the old-fashioned or the fern leaf. The flowers are a little bit different shape to them, but they're all beautiful, and they look like little hearts that are kind of dripping, and then they open up as the flowers mature. So the foliage color on Dicentra can be green, it can be kind of a blue-green, it can be chartreuse, kind of a yellow-green. So definitely not only the flower colors can vary, there's also different foliage colors as well. Personally, I kind of like the chartreuse green color one, because in the spring when your garden is just starting to wake up and that chartreuse green is emerging from the ground, it is so beautiful even before the plant has flowers. Just to see that nice foliage coming out of the ground with that kind of chartreuse yellow, it is really beautiful. Bleeding heart also are deer resistant, so that's kind of a nice thing for those of you that have deer in the garden. Typically not a plant you need to worry about the deer browsing. They do like to be planted in a moderate to moist location. And like I stated earlier, some of them will go dormant in the summer, so don't be afraid if it starts warming up and your foliage kind of starts to look like it's petering out a little bit. That's perfectly fine and normal for that plant to do. Another plant that I think is kind of unique and different, and this is going to be good for shady locations again, this is the Aralia, and the variety we carry is Aurelia Sun King. And the thing I like about that is I'll mix it in with hostas in the garden, so it adds just a little bit of drama, some extra texture, some extra coloration. It really breaks up a shade garden with its intense chartreuse green foliage. Likes to be planted in part shade to shade, and at the end of the summer it has some little white flowers on it. Typically though, I would say when I'm growing the plant, I'm growing it more for its foliage interest than what I am for its flowers, because the flowers really are pretty insignificant in my opinion. It likes to be grown in areas with deep loam, kind of moist, well-drained soil conditions. And it's a great specimen not only for in your part shade to shade gardens, but it does really well in containers as well. So mix it in with some other perennials, or even put some annuals in with it. And it's a nice, even though it's a perennial, sometimes I'll describe it to people as a shrub just based off of the size that it gets. It gets about 3 foot tall and 3 foot wide, but it does die back to the ground, so therefore it is a perennial. Next, we're going to head back to the full sun garden, and we're going to take a look at Heliopsis. So Heliopsis is a native perennial, again hardy in zones 3 to 9, as all of these are that we've been talking about, with bright golden yellow flowers. The nice thing with Heliopsis is once it heats up and warms up enough, that plant will bloom all summer long. It loves the heat. In fact, the more heat it gets, I feel like the happier the plant is. Sometimes here in Michigan, because we are a little bit cooler than what some of you southern gardeners are, it takes a little while for that plant to wake up and start to flower. But once we do hit the heat here, the heat of the summer, the plant just, it goes crazy and flowers all summer long. It likes to be grown in moist, well-drained areas, but can handle periods of drought once the plant is established. We do encourage you to, if the plant feels like it's starting to slow down a little bit on flowering, to go ahead and deadhead it or remove the blooms that are spent or dying, and that will encourage new growth, which will reward you with more flowers. So Heliopsis gets about 24 to 32 inches tall, although there are some varieties that can get upwards of 4 foot tall. So you'll really want to kind of watch which varieties you're looking at and what your needs are for your garden when you're selecting a Heliopsis, because you might have, you know, the shorter 2 foot version or a 4 foot version, which I think go in very different places in a garden. So green foliage with nice single yellow flowers, that would be the Heliopsis Tuscan Sun that we carry. Or we have another one that's got nice green foliage with double kind of golden yellow flowers, and that would be Tuscan Gold, or a newer variety that we've had for a couple years now, which has beautiful variegated foliage. It's green foliage with white edges and then nice yellow flowers, would be the Heliopsis Bit of Honey. So all of these have a great place in the garden. So it just kind of depends on if you're looking for flower with foliage interest as well, or just, you know, green foliage with beautiful flowers. Definitely there's a place for Heliopsis, I think, in anybody's full sun garden. Another perennial that is kind of an older variety, but yet I think is beautiful, is Gardia. So Gardia is a long blooming perennial. That's another one of those that can bloom for a good portion of the summer. It's drought tolerant. Gardia come in both single and double flower forms. And typically when you're looking at Gardia, they're going to be some shade of orange or burgundy or yellow, or a mix of 2 or more of those colors. So a lot of variation with Gardia. And also too, you can find that the flower size may vary a little bit from variety to variety. They typically get about 12 to 18 inches tall and wide or so. They like to be planted in a full sun area. Also well drained, so kind of a, I'm going to say more of a sandy, but it doesn't have to be sandy. Just kind of a light soil that's well drained. If they get too much water, they tend to sometimes get, the feet will kind of rot off. So a nice warm drained area. Full sun, deer resistant, bee and butterfly friendly. So again, if you're looking to have a butterfly or pollinator garden, Gardia are a great addition for that. It's also known as blanket flower. Great cut flower. So if you're wanting to grow some flowers for vases, or just, you know, if you've got a cut flower garden that you are working with, Gardia are a great addition. They also dry really well. So if you're somebody who likes to do dried flowers, a lot of variation in color with the Gardia. It's a nice native perennial, and typically when you're looking at native perennials, those are usually some of the ones that are just easier to grow, because if they can live out in nature on their own, they should be able to grow well in our gardens. So hopefully this list will kind of inspire some of you who are at the low and the high spectrum of our gardening zones. There's always a right flower for everyone's garden, and I think it's nice that I can have this list of flowers that not only work well in the north, but also work well in the south, and we're able to kind of hit a big group of gardeners all in one video. If you have any questions on any of these perennials we talked about today, or any comments, I'd love to have you leave them below. If you are new to our station, we welcome you to subscribe. as we will be coming out with a lot of videos similar to this winter. Not a lot of color going on in the greenhouse right now, so we're trying this style and seeing how it goes. But I think this way at least we can get a lot of information in front of you during the winter months when I think a lot of us are looking for some great inspiration. Thanks for watching. I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings.